On October 21st, 2022, a YouTuber named Aini said that China has a soft power deficiency.
Where is China's soft power? China seems to really be struggling in this area.
I watched Aini's video 2.5 years ago, and I definitely agreed at the time that China did not have soft power. But it is now 2025, and so much has happened since 2022, which leads us to re-examine the question, is Aini still right that China has a soft power deficiency? I don't think so anymore. Aini uses the words of Joseph Nye, a famous American political scientist, to define the elements of soft power as cultural attractiveness, foreign policy, and political ideals. She focuses mainly on the first point, cultural attractiveness.
It allows people to foster an appreciation of your culture, a curiosity of wanting to go over there and kind of experience what it's like for themselves, and it also allows them, foreigners, to bring back a favorable impression of the place they visited and to continue spreading that favorable impression.
And shows how China is not as culturally attractive to other countries, at least to the West.
You have Japan, well known and loved for the anime they create, and the constant, understandable romanticizing of life there. And you have China. You have jokes about the CCP, about the social credit system, and copy-pasters on the Tiananmen massacre.
In summer 2023, Pew Research also released a survey that showed that Asian Americans viewed Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan exceedingly more favorably than China. 68% of Asian Americans surveyed viewed Japan favorably, 62% of them viewed South Korea favorably, and 56% viewed Taiwan favorably. However, only 20% of Asian Americans viewed China favorably, and a whopping 52% of Asian Americans surveyed viewed China as somewhat to very unfavorable. When looking at Chinese Americans specifically, it seems like we really like Japan and Korea, but really loathe our motherland, China. I say our because I'm a Chinese American man making this video. I guess our parents forgot to teach the Nanjing Massacre to us, an event even modern Japan has not officially apologized for. Within East Asia, the perceptions are about the same, if not worse. 76% of Japanese people surveyed viewed China as a major threat. 66% of Taiwanese and 64% of South Koreans believe the same thing. But the story changes in countries in the Global South. Global South countries are generally south of the United States and Europe and usually have a history of being colonized by these two places. Pew Research found that people in the Global South view China more favorably than most Western countries. Over 60% of Thai, Tunisian, Nigerian, and Peruvian respondents viewed China favorably. The average favorability percentage towards China in surveyed African and South American countries are 2 to 3 times higher than in Western ones. Joseph Nye defines soft power as how strongly other states want to follow a country, or how closely it can get other countries to want what it wants. I use public opinion polls to measure soft power because if 75% of the people in Nigeria have a favorable opinion of China, then those citizens probably want Nigeria to follow China, or want what China wants. I will explain why countries in the Global South favor China later in this video, but the reasons seem to stem from foreign policy and ideology, the two other aspects of soft power. This collection of Pew Research survey data shows that Aini has a point. China did have a soft power deficiency, but mainly in the West. Western countries historically did not want to follow China and believed they did not want the same things as China. But things have changed. I would say China's first huge show of soft power is with the video game Black Myth Wukong. Chinese history, culture, and lore permeate this role-playing game. This game is based on the classic Chinese novel, Journey to the West. You can clearly tell it's a Chinese game with Chinese characteristics through the art style, scenery, and characters. Americans who played the game raved about Wukong. I'm Dante, a popular Twitch streamer, said
this game is amazing, man. This game is absolutely amazing.
And the great YouTube commentator Penguin Zero said the game
actually exceeded my expectations.
Political commentator and above average gamer Hassan Piker even loved this Chinese game too.
I loved it though. God damn, what an incredible fucking game, man. Everything was phenomenal. It was one of the most enjoyable experiences I've had gaming.
The game even won 3 Steam Awards for PC games. Steam's Game of the Year Award, Outstanding Story-Rich Game Award, and even the Best Game You Suck At award. Wukong has an overwhelmingly positive review on Steam, which is quite rare for games. The news site Modern Diplomacy said Wukong is an important dissemination of Chinese culture on a global scale. Another article on The Diplomat predicts that this cultural exhibition could encourage young people to learn Chinese and go study abroad in Hebei province. With the massively successful video game like Black Myth Wukong, China created a very strong foundation for its soft power. Although many players of Wukong are Chinese, the positive reviews from Western content creators and even diplomatic sources all show how attractive Chinese culture is now to the West. In January 2025, Donald Trump announced that TikTok would be banned in America unless it sold itself to an American buyer for national security reasons. Some Americans, undeterred, decided to join a Chinese social media app called RedNote, or Xiaohongshu as it's known in China. RedNote is basically like Chinese Instagram. When the West and the East started to mix on RedNote, there were a ton of friendly and funny cultural exchanges. The Chinese started to ask Americans to help out with their English homework, advanced computer science projects, and even asked them to show photos of their cats and pets. Chinese netizens even joked that they are Chinese spies who are here to steal Americans' data. American kids flocked to Xiaohongshu and started to learn Chinese too. Westerners who joined RedNote also saw how modern and clean Chinese cities are, how cheap groceries are, how low the cost of living is, and started to love the social media site and China as a country too.
Listen, I didn't think that the culture shock of joining RedNote would be watching grocery hauls. Chinese grocery hauls are insane because they can actually afford food. You guys?
Although we've all gotten on RedNote and we can see the lifestyle that all of the Chinese people have, a lot of us Americans are fucking pissed. The price of going out to eat, the price of groceries, public transportation. And the people on RedNote are so fucking flabbergasted that we have to work 2 jobs just to keep our roof over our head. US government, you fucked up big time.
And I'm like making friends with these amazing Chinese people. Their fashion, phenomenal. They're so kind and funny and smart, and their city is beautiful.
You even had white American men, one of the groups you'd least expect to start praising China, give China its flowers. White people even started to make TikToks showing what you can see if you give China a chance and visit the country. As news that the United States Supreme Court could uphold the TikTok ban around January 10th, 2025, 700,000 users joined RedNote within 2 days. By Thursday, January 16th, there were reportedly 3.6 million American active daily users. There was a peak of 32.5 million active daily users from America. Duolingo saw a 216% increase in Mandarin learners on January 13th, just days ahead of SCOTUS unanimously upholding the sale or ban of TikTok. Spanish only grew by 40% around the same time frame. However, after Trump put a pause on the ban, RedNote's daily active users in the US declined by 54% on January 20th, when enforcement of the ban was put on hold. Usage between January 20th to 22nd declined by roughly 17% compared with the week prior. This shows that while RedNote got red hot, it quickly cooled off. But while the users left, I don't think their impression of China did. You had kids and adults in Middle America shocked at Chinese culture, cities, and their low cost of living. 2.5 years ago, Aini said that China lacked cultural attractiveness, and I think she was right to make that claim. But now, China might have cultural envy, where the West craves Chinese food, urban landscapes, and technology. You even have white men joking that they are white Chinese, which is a joke that would never have happened like 5 years ago.
Every night I whisper to myself, it's just one day closer to becoming Chinese. That was what Brace was talking about on Chapo, where he said he's the white Chinese. It's just about white men in the Western world who are actually Chinese.
Wukong and RedNote increased Chinese soft power in small but significant ways. However, everything about Chinese soft power changed after IShowSpeed streamed his trip to China. IShowSpeed is an internet personality and live streamer on YouTube. He often streams gaming, Omegle calls, and his travels. From March 24th to April 7th, 2025, he streamed 8 times in China and once in Mongolia on April 10th. His 8 Chinese streams totaled 69 million million views, averaging 8.6 million views per stream. These Chinese streams are among his most popular and longest too. This just shows you how much content China has to offer for soft power. Speed's trip showed the amazing food that China has to offer, the technology, its Shaolin Kung Fu,
Bro, China is so beautiful, bro.
and its arts. Viewers also raved about IShowSpeed's streams in China. One said, the Chinese fans actually seem very respectful, and they aren't attacking him like people in other countries. Another said, after watching this video, I realized how stupid my previous views on China were. I think if I don't go to China, I will regret it for the rest of my life. One viewer also said, ain't gonna lie, out of all the RRL streams, the Chinese have been some of the most respectful and peaceful people. Cool AF too. A viewer from the Shenzhen stream said, China made me speechless. Every city looks super clean. This comment got 2,100 likes. Someone commented on his Chongqing stream, $1 billion of CIA propaganda just eliminated by a black guy with a phone. Modern Diplomacy said that IShowSpeed's China tour exemplifies this application of soft power. The broadcast showcased China's modern infrastructure, technological innovation, and vibrant culture. The Economist, who loves to criticize China, even wrote an article describing how Speed's China trip helped make China cool. The overall positive comments on his streams to the positive coverage in mainstream political sources all show how China's soft power has gained hard ground. Black Myth Wukong, RedNote, and IShowSpeed all put historic and modern Chinese culture on display for the Western world to see. Even after these events, some Westerners might still see China as an adversary, but I believe that Chinese soft power has arrived and set up a strong base here in the West, especially among younger generations. A growing segment of the West believes China is an attractive place to be, has attractive culture, and attractive people. But I digress. If soft power is measured by how strongly a country wants to follow another country, then more Westerners increasingly want to follow China's example. While Aine's video makes it seem like China has no soft power at all, I think its soft power has always existed. Brand Finance, a consultancy that evaluates company brands and measures country soft power, found China ranked number 5 in their first Global Soft Power Index in 2020. Their data was gathered from surveys in autumn 2019. Here's a chart comparing China and America's soft power ranking over time. The lowest China ever reached in the Global Soft Power Index was 8th in 2021. This was a huge drop-off, but even with the negative press about China during COVID, it was still top 10 in the world. In Brand Finance's 2022 report, Scott Chen, the managing director at Brand Finance China, said that China's big jump is because of its anti-COVID-19 efforts, innovation, the Winter Olympics, and its commercial brands. If you live in the West and you're thinking, how could anyone approve what China did during COVID? It's because China sent many Southeast Asian countries free personal protective equipment and COVID vaccines. I mentioned earlier in the video that the Global South generally rates China more favorably, and that China has more soft power in those countries. Now, how did China win over the hearts and minds of the people in these places? It largely has to do with China's Belt and Road Initiative, where China invests in a country by building infrastructure, hospitals, and ports for economic development. And economic development is something sorely needed in these Global South countries who still experience the vestiges of colonialism. For more information about the Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI, I recommend First Thought's video on it. Aine does acknowledge that China's soft power
does not come from cultural attractiveness. It comes from economic might. It comes from having a market of 1.4 billion people, and it comes from coercion and payment,
which the BRI is an extension of. However, I think another way to frame the BRI is through the other sources of soft power, foreign policy and ideology. China has a non-interventionist foreign policy and ideology. Generally speaking, the BRI is a Chinese foreign policy and ideology that allows countries to chase what China chases: economic development through peaceful trade and infrastructure. And the BRI has been successful in increasing China's soft power. Countries that sign on to the Belt and Road Initiative usually view China very favorably afterwards. Pew Research found in 2024, Thailand, Nigeria, Peru, and others all had positive attitudes towards China, and these countries are all in the BRI. Now, Chinese foreign policy and ideology have been very fruitful for their soft power, but what about changes to their cultural attractiveness? The last last part of soft power? Well, recently, China made huge improvements in that area. Brand Finance's 2025 Soft Power Report said that China increased its soft power since 2024 because it streamlined tourism, grew international recognition for its domestic companies, foreign perceptions of Chinese people increased, and continued its Belt and Road Initiative. I would say the first 3 points all increase China's cultural attractiveness. China shot up to second place in the 2025 Global Soft Power Index. So around autumn of 2024, when the Global Soft Power Index's survey was conducted, China achieved a huge amount of soft power. This is even before Americans flocked to RedNote and almost half a year before IShowSpeed's trip to China. With a strong foundation from the Global South, China improved its cultural attractiveness and its overall soft power in 2025. It's possible that in the 2026 Global Soft Power Index, China will be first overall. Outside America and Europe, China currently stands out as a global soft power leader. Only recently has China's soft power started its journey to the West. Now, why did China have a soft power deficiency from the West in the first place? Aini argues it's largely because of Chinese government censorship producing clumsy pieces of propaganda that are simply bad content. However, I personally believe that American foreign policy affects Chinese soft power more than Chinese censors, Asian representation in Hollywood, or anything domestic in Western countries. While Hollywood stereotypes and fetishization are bad, they did not cause Chinese soft power deficiency, but are rather downstream of it. We see negative coverage about China being a backwards country that can't innovate. Western media covers China as a place with no freedom, like freedom of speech or elections, and a place that crushes political dissent. But it wasn't always like this. In 1972, American foreign policy was starting to warm up to China because the United States believed that they could weaken global communism by splitting the Chinese away from the Soviets. Press coverage of China even turned positive in 1972 when President Nixon visited China to hold diplomatic talks. A columnist at the New York Times in 1972 said that President Nixon's decision to build diplomatic ties with China was Nixon's finest hour. And because America thought China was dropping communism and was less of an ideological threat, some journalists started to praise Beijing's economic policies while ignoring any domestic oppression. When Deng Xiaoping, the second leader of Communist China, opened up China to Western businesses in 1978, he became Time magazine's Man of the Year in 1979, and again in 1985, for further pro-Western economic reforms. Now, all of this nascent positive coverage stopped abruptly when the Tiananmen Square incident happened on June 4th, 1989. Since 1989, America started to demonize China because it believes that China is a challenger to American dominance and Western capitalism. Breakthrough News has a good video on explaining China's economic system. This change in media coverage raised the question of who is a country trying to look attractive to and why. Why is it important for Japan and South Korea to appear culturally attractive to the West? And if China fully bowed down to the West, as America thought it would in 1978, would America give China permission to appear culturally attractive to the West too? While I believe that Chinese soft power is here to stay, America might have something to say about it. The US House of Representatives passed a bill allocating $1.6 billion to spread anti-China propaganda. While not a law yet, this still shows the American government is deliberately trying to limit Chinese soft power in the States. America was never going to paint China in a positive light ever since it learned that it was not going to become a vassal of the United States. Therefore, America and the West do not want to show how culturally attractive China can be. Aini does a good job focusing on China's soft power deficiency through the lens of cultural attractiveness. She also hints that geopolitics is an important aspect of soft power.
Geopolitics plays an undeniable role in how the Western world sees China. It is literally in the US's interest to present China in a more unfavorable light. So geopolitics is absolutely crucial to the discussion of our perception of China in the Western world. However, this video is based on soft power, and so my focus here is really on cultural attractiveness.
Joseph Nye's original breakdown of soft power are cultural attractiveness, ideology, and international institutions. I want to expand on Aini's video about soft power by describing how cultural attractiveness feeds into ideology and international institutions. A full analysis of Chinese foreign policy was likely not in the scope of her video, and it definitely is out of the scope of mine. But to understand why a country attempts to be culturally attractive to anyone is largely a political and economic question. There is hard power behind soft power. Here are some very simplified examples from history just to illustrate the dynamic. China built train lines in Tanzania and Zambia from 1970 to 1975 to establish diplomatic ties, gain political allies, and show international solidarity with Africa. In turn, African votes were vital to let China into the United Nations in 1971. This infrastructure, as well as others in the Belt and Road Initiative, give Africans new economic opportunities and allow them to build wealth. Fast forward to the 2020s, and you'll see part of this infrastructure development includes places for table tennis, where Chinese coaches train Angolan kids. This table tennis diplomacy can make young Angolans more likely to find China culturally attractive by giving them fun things to do and supporting Angola's Olympic journey. Throughout this soft power cycle, Africa gets more infrastructure and development, and China gets resources and political allies. America does the same as well. Since the ideology of America is capitalism, it will set up international institutions and foreign policy that benefits capitalism. These institutions include the International Monetary Fund that promotes free markets, deregulation, and private capital. When developing countries like Nigeria needed to get loans from the IMF in 1986 to recover a struggling economy, the IMF forced Nigeria to cut public sector spending on education, remove price controls that protected local farmers from cheap foreign goods undercutting their produce, devalue their currency to make imports for their burgeoning steel industry more expensive, and among other things. Now, to make these policies seem more attractive, the United States promotes itself by exporting its movies, music, and TV shows to the world. The job of these pieces of media is to show what the best its capitalist ideology has to offer, or at least it dresses up capitalism in the best light. Making your country seem more attractive brings in more believers into your system, more trade opportunities, and more money. There are a ton of academic papers describing how the IMF imposes capitalist policies on countries, how these policies boost corporate profits, and wreak havoc on domestic populations. You can find the links in the video description. These two examples, one from a socialist country like China and one from a capitalist country like America, show how all the elements of soft power are interdependent and are coordinated to create hard economic power. A country's economic ideology will create foreign policy to support the ideology. Creating international institutions or setting foreign policy allows you to export that ideology to foreign countries. Increasing your cultural attractiveness will make other nations more likely to listen to what your ideology is. Aini clearly raised an interesting question. Why is China so bad on soft power? I think Aini does a good job of trying to isolate the cultural attractiveness element of soft power. This video revisits her question and asks, in 2025, does China still have a soft power deficiency? She ends her video by quoting an article from the journal Council of Foreign Relations that distills the core of her video's argument.
Soft power cannot be bought, it must be earned. And it is best earned when a society's talented citizens are allowed to interact directly with the world rather than being controlled by the authorities.
In 2025, I think China absolutely has earned its soft power. Each of the three events I mentioned, Wukong, RedNote, and Speed Streams, are all examples of China's talented citizens interacting directly with the world. I believe China no longer has a soft power deficiency, but it has established soft power strength. China is strong on soft power. I am very excited to see how Chinese soft power continues in the West, and how Americans will look towards China as a leader in the world. Welcome to the Chinese century.